What did you watch?
So, I kind of mentioned this to you, is I've been watching Slasher on Netflix, and it was a complete roller coaster. I was watching season 3. I haven't watched the other 2 seasons. I don't know that I will.
Why did you start with season 3?
It's an anthology, so each season is different.
So you can start at any point.
So it doesn't matter.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I think I enjoyed it at the end.
Okay.
And I was so wrong on who the murderer was that I was actually really happy. I was like, man, I was dumb.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. Did the twist rival that of Harper's Island?
I haven't watched Harper's Island.
Have you not? Did we not watch that together?
No, we haven't watched it.
Oh god, I've watched it like 6 times probably.
I know. We've talked about watching it eventually.
It's so bad. I think you'd enjoy it.
I cannot. I think I probably
would enjoy
would.
the heck out of it.
I don't know whether it rivals Harper's Island or not.
Okay.
It was really pretty. Like the surprise was both there the entire time, so it made sense, but also surprising.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, good on them. And I don't know if it was because I thought I had figured it out, and then I thought I had been verified by accidentally spoiling myself online, that I didn't see the other, like I didn't see the actual person happening or not. But when the surprise came, I was like, oh wow, yeah, all right, fair enough.
That's good.
That is the murderer. I thought early on it was very frustrating because most of the characters were terrible. However, they killed off all of those ones pretty quick and then went on to kill everyone else. So I was like, oh dang, okay, we did kill characters I enjoy eventually.
Good.
Which was also, it was sad, but I was like, man, they were not afraid to just murder everyone.
Seriously, people gotta be okay with murder. I mean, I am.
Yeah, we've accepted it, and you need to too.
Writers gotta kill their darlings.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes their darlings are fully fledged characters, or maybe even human beings.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I would.
Good.
I think I would recommend it.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just if you're looking for a good time, and a lot of the messaging was way heavy-handed, and that portion was like, maybe, and maybe I don't know that they sucked the landing on any of their themes, but the actual mystery and the kills were all pretty dang unique.
Okay.
So if that's kind of the thing you enjoy, I definitely skipped a kill. I just was like, I'm going to skip this next 3 to 5 minutes because I don't need to watch it.
Fair.
And there might be a few moments of that.
Okay.
So I watched Slasher. We watched Lights Out.
We did. We watched Lights Out together. My second viewing. Your first viewing.
I hadn't seen it before. What do you think watching it the second time?
Second time, I think the first time I left it more impressed because of its execution of the themes that are in it. And the first time I left it just feeling refreshed by the fact that I hadn't seen capable protagonists in a horror movie for a very long time at the time that I was watching this back in 2016, maybe 2017, whenever it came out for the first time. Now, having seen a lot of horror in the meantime, having seen a lot of development in the meantime of the horror genre, I feel like it's not as refreshing or new. And the dialogue, of course, is clunky. Plot-wise, it's like, meh. But I felt like thematically it strikes home, and again, I just love protagonists that think of things that even I wouldn't think of.
Yeah, smart protagonists.
Yeah. What about you? What were your thoughts? First time viewer.
Yeah, first time viewer. So I think what was really cool about it was what they already had in the short film, which is just that structuring of scare, which I just was like, man, that's really cool to see something that has never been utilized, as far as I know. That specific light on, light off technique, like that was just really cool.
Yeah, and I feel like it definitely has been utilized before, but never to such an extent. Like a thing where like you turn the lights off and you see somebody turn the lights on and it's gone. Like Hereditary does it at one point where she flicks the lights on and off a few times and the ghost keeps appearing. But that came out after this. This one I think is unique in the fact that it sticks to it for extremely long takes.
Yes.
It'll just keep going for like a dozen flicks on and off.
Yeah.
Which is great.
And I mean, hats off to having a rule and just going with it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really cool thing. And also it made it interesting to think about afterwards, because like those times that it was turned off, for me, I'm like, like when they had turned on the light switch, but then the like demon herself turned it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was having to go through excruciating amounts of pain to turn it off, to be, like, in the light. And that was just kind of an interesting thing to be able to, like, be like, oh, yeah, that's a cool part of this world.
Yeah. They did a good job of establishing the rules of the world ahead of time, like in the very first couple pages of the script, probably, and then they didn't change anything. They didn't introduce anything new except for the blacklight.
Yep.
And the blacklight even itself makes sense when you think about the rules of the world. So
yeah,
that was, I think, really well done that way.
Yeah, overall, like, the film quality of it was held back by it being, it's 10 years old at this point. Yeah.
Well, it's not 10 years old.
Oh, no?
It's like 3 years old.
It's only, oh yeah, it was 2016, huh?
I think so.
Okay, well then I think it was lacking a little bit.
Yeah.
The actual cinematic language of it.
I mean, it is extremely average in everything, I think, except the thematics of the plot itself. The dialogue's clunky, the acting's meh, the production value's meh. There's a lot of things about it that aren't amazing. Yeah. And yet it still, I think it still endures. Mm-hmm. I heard a little quote when I was listening to My Favorite Murder, my podcast that I like so much, just came out with a book. And on their book tour, they read passages from their book, and I need to actually read the book. I haven't actually read it, but I listened to some excerpts from it. And one of them was talking about things that therapists have said to them. And one of the quotes really stuck out to me, which is that our brains are really good at telling us scary stories in relation to anxiety and depression and things like that, and mental illness. But specifically, I think anxiety. And I think us two can certainly relate to that because, you know, even just the plane flying too close overhead, and then immediately my first thought is, oh, what if it's going to crash? Mm-hmm. That's a scary story right there. But I also thought it related to us and this podcast really specifically because we are really good at telling ourselves and each other scary stories. Yeah. You know, weekly for this podcast, but also kind of on the daily. Right. It's just part of our lives. I thought that was something to share with you.
Yeah. I like it as a quote. Yeah, it's very true. Like the pitches that I at least pitch on here are the ones that I'm like, okay, these are the ones I've put thought into, but those are like one of 10 different things that I think of over the course of a week. Yeah, exactly. And most of them aren't as fun or interesting.
Exactly. I feel like a lot of the ones that I pitched on here and that I think of in my daily life are literally just taking my own anxieties and taking them to an extreme. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm scared about inherited mental illness and things, so let me make that into a ghost story, because that's its like extreme storytelling version of it. Or self-discovery or whatever, like feeling like you don't know who yourself is and taking that to an extreme with All Good Things Are Wild and stuff like that. I feel like horror in so many ways is just taking our own anxieties to the farthest possible storytelling point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking because this one that I'm doing today is actually, it's not the actual, so there's sort of two components to it. One is the actual scare factor, which is not something I'm afraid of. Like, it's not something that I think is going to happen or is really that scary. But the thing lurking underneath, which is actually more of anger or resentment that I feel. It was interesting kind of working on this one because the fear itself isn't necessarily the driving factor as much as the feelings that come from this own thing. Right.
Interesting. Well, we can jump into it in a second, but before we do that, we should say this is Jump Scare the Podcast.
Yeah. That's right. And what do we do here?
We pitch and develop an original horror concept every week, basically creating an audio treatment for you as we break down this entire script into a feature or sometimes into other forms of media, which is exciting.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Olivia.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, that thing that for a hot second I was like, oh yeah, let's move on to the pitches, and then went, wait.
We haven't.
We have 100% literally said earlier that we need to introduce the podcast because we forgot.
We don't always do it.
We forget.
We'll leave it up to you to go back through the episodes and figure out which ones we failed on.
We'll leave it to you to figure out what podcast you're listening to as you're listening to it. Though chances are you probably queued this up, downloaded it on purpose, started listening to it on purpose. So I don't know how necessary it is for us to tell you while you're listening to it, but
Yeah, this is on you.
if you don't know by now,
Tune in, turn up.
turnip.
Turnip.
Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the blah blah blah. Now that we've gotten that out of the way,
You ready?
yeah. Hit me.
Alrighty.
I'm really excited to do nothing this episode except listen and then give my feedback.
Yeah.
Because I was so excited about last week's pitch that I have since completely, I feel like I'm out of creative energy entirely. And for a hot second today, I was like, oh shit, in a week I need to pitch something.
Well, I'll give you some creative energy coming from me.
Thanks.
And then
I'll
you
need it.
can chill out for a little bit longer. And then you'll have to say something.
Okay.
Next week.
Oh.
But for
Go.
now, it's
Go.
my turn.
Go.
Okay. So before I start, there will be a link in the description to a video that's a little bit of homework. So everybody can go watch it really quickly. It's a Nat Geo video that will help explain what the basis of my scare is. I'll also give an explainer, so if you just enjoy me versus Nat Geo, fair enough. But that's a little bit of extra.
I certainly do.
Aw, thanks.
You're welcome.
But you can go listen to that, you cannot. Either way, let's get going. Here, I'll read you. I wrote actual little character descriptions.
Okay.
I'll read them to you really quickly. Maybe it'll be helpful. Maybe it won't. I don't care. Parker, she's looking for a smidge of excitement before she starts the rest of her life. Marty, the only one cautious enough to not immediately accept drugs from a stranger. Kay, no newcomer to adversity. She'll sacrifice what she has to keep going. And then Dodge, nickname comes from the fact that he dodged the draft, but a free thinker he is not. His parents just have enough money.
Okay.
So, those are our characters. 2 guys, 2 girls.
Solid.
Alrighty. So, my film opens up with a group of 4 driving up to San Francisco.
Okay.
Who arrive in Haight-Ashbury in their station wagon, looking for the experience of a lifetime.
Okay, is this a period piece?
Yep.
Another one. All right.
It's the peak of the summer of love, and the Haight is buzzing with excitement and hippie counterculture.
Okay. We're back into counterculture, too.
Let's go! I can't get enough! I just like rebels. The crew quickly settles in on a small grassy area and set their tents up to camp out. While setting up, they look around at the environment, and clearly this town has seen better. There are people everywhere, garbage everywhere, and surprisingly, a good number of armed police officers walking around. So, that night, we're just going to kind of skip to that night. They set up, they do whatever they're going to do, and then they go out to party. That night, they meet a cool dude named Leo, and they just start chilling with him.
Is that the name of the guy from that 70s show who always sells some weed?
Probably.
Okay.
It's him.
Okay,
It's
cool.
just him.
Cool.
We're going to hire the actor and then age him down. It's going to be really
I'm ready.
expensive.
I'm excited.
It's going to be so expensive. Leo, you know, he's a cool dude, they think, and he makes a couple of promises. He says, you know, while you're here, you're going to experience great bands, fun dancing, decent sex, and the best feeling drug that no one has heard of yet. And he shows them what looks like a little mushroom or fungi. And he kind of describes it to him. And what he says is like, oh, it's a member of the cordyceps fungal family, and that it's the strongest psychedelic that they can get on the market at this time.
I'm trying to figure out at which point the Nat Geo video comes into play, and I can't tell if so far it's about the Haight-Ashbury Summer of Love or if it's about the fungus. I'm guessing it's about the fungus.
Who knows? It's the real mystery here. Parker, who at the moment is kind of our lead protagonist, is a little bit hesitant. Marty refuses it altogether, but Kay and Dodge are like, let's do it. And so they take him, and Parker is talked into it. So they take the drugs, Marty doesn't, and the night erupts into a psychedelic fantasy. It's fast, it's blurred, it's wild, and it looks like a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. So they're all having a good time, which all culminates in the next morning as the group rises from their tents, greets a new day, and is in rough shape. Mm-hmm. They're all feeling it. Well, all but Marty. who, unfortunately for everyone else, is a morning person.
Cool.
The 3, they're like feeling pretty bad, but they're gonna start their day and have a good time. It's their second day in, so they can't be having a rough time yet.
Mm-hmm.
But as the day progresses, Dodge especially starts to feel worse and worse, until the point where he starts actually, like, he's like, I can't move. I need somewhere that's like a cool, like, damp climate. It's so dry. I need water. And he's just nonstop demanding that he needs water.
Is he turning into a fungus?
You'll
Is he turning into a fungus?
You'll freaking see.
Fine.
I'll explain it in a minute.
Okay.
So he eventually starts actually, like, spitting out blood. Like, he's really having a really hard time. And so they set him down, but then all of a sudden one of them notices something on Kay's back. Actually, it's underneath her back. Underneath the skin, they see something moving, maybe even something growing. Kay, for a moment, pulls out her knife. She's like, you know what? I'll cut it out. Like, what the hell is happening to me? And Marty chimes in and goes, guys, we might all be hallucinating. Let's maybe chill out. Who knows? And they're like, wait a second, but you're seeing it. And he's like, you know what? But maybe I was drugged. I don't know. Like, this could be really bad. Let's not do this. And so they put away the knife. And then they turn back to Dodge, and he's gone. And they go, oh shit, we need to find him.
Uh-huh.
And so we continue through as they're searching for him. They're not finding him. And so they say, you know what? We need to figure out what was in those drugs. We need to find Leo. They eventually track him down. And they're like, Leo, what's going on? One of our friends is gone. And then he notices Kay's back. And he goes, wait, that's not right. That shouldn't be there. Oh, shit. And so at this point, I'll kind of talk to you about cordiceps.
Okay.
Which are which is the video to go watch and is the basis of this, which is that, do you know cordyceps at all?
No.
Okay, so they are a fungi that in forests, they will release their pollen, and their pollen will go and take over ants' bodies, and they will go and they will be forced to walk to a wet, damp place, and then they will do what's like a death bite. So they'll just like bite onto the ground and they'll stay there. And then the fungi will grow out of them. And then the creepiest part is then this stem will break out of the back of their body and will release more pollen.
And do it all over again.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that is happening to Kay.
So has this ever happened in real life? Like, does this work on humans? No. Okay.
No.
It reminds me of, there's an episode, I think it's the season 3 opener of Hannibal, the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And Hannibal was fucked up. I can't believe I watched all of it, but there were some episodes that were just impossible to watch. Maybe it was season 2 opener. But they find a series of bodies that have been buried in the forest with mushrooms growing out of the bodies. And they are uncovering the crime scene of all these murdered bodies and find that they've all been hooked up to IVs and realize that they were kept alive as they were turned into these gardens for mushrooms to grow out of them, and one of them is still alive.
Oh, Jesus.
And it's horrifying, but like it's very similar to this in that actual fungus growing in their bodies.
That's horrible.
Yes.
Okay, no, this has not happened. There are like, I think it's like 6,000 different varieties of cordyceps.
Right.
But no, none of them have taken over humans or anything.
Okay.
Because that would be crazy. So Leo explains that he's actually a police officer. He was put undercover as a form of crowd control. And what he's feeding people is this drug that's supposed to overexert serotonin and then depresses them as a form of keeping everybody down. But they've only done animal testing, so they were one of the first groups that they did testing on to see how it would react. And something's really, really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts to he's like, you guys need to come with me. We need to figure out what's going on. And there starts to be sort of a fight that breaks out between the 3 people, Marty, Kay, and Parker, and Leo, as he's like, you need to come with me. He goes to grab Parker, and she stabs him. She has taken Kay's knife and stabs him in the stomach.
Uh-huh.
And he falls to the ground, bleeding, freaking out, and dying.
Mm-hmm.
At which point, the other two are like, what just happened? And then Parker starts to walk away from them. And they're like, Parker, and they like catch up, and they're like, where are you going? And she looks at them. She goes, please stop me. I can't stop myself. And she continues walking. And they go to try to stop her, and Parker ends up like cutting Marty. And so now he's kind of injured, and she ends up hitting Kay on the back of the neck, which causes this severe pain. And Parker continues to walk away and gets separated from them. At that point is when Kay's neck starts to break open and something underneath starts to pull out. Kay, at this point, she like grabs onto the ground and this stem starts bursting out of her. And Marty runs over to her like, Kay, we need to get you help. We need to like go. We need to go. And she looks at him and she just says, you need to run. And then she dies right there. And Marty sort of stands up, but he's bleeding, and he starts to try to get away when the bulb comes and it explodes.
Ooh.
And pollen flies all over them.
Ooh.
And Marty, like, I kind of want just a shot of Marty like falling to his knees with his shirt over his mouth, but blood, and just screaming as the pollen has surrounded them. And then he looks to the knife that's on the ground. And then I'm thinking like there's like bonfires that have been going on and stuff. And so he looks at like a canister of gasoline, and then it just cuts out. And that's sort of the end.
Oh, the end of the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, how long is this?
I was thinking probably an hour 20.
Oh, okay. So you have basically the whole thing mapped out.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I have a solid idea of where I want the beats and stuff to go.
Okay. Structurally, where would you say first act ends?
First act ends with them waking up the next morning.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay. 'Cause I was thinking that it ended when they chose to take the mushrooms, but if it ends when they wake up the next day, that's a bit... Okay. Then there's a lot of second act to flesh out then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, how it flows, when you just told it beat to beat, felt like that could have been the entire thing in like 30 minutes or less. So that's why I was surprised.
It probably could, yeah. That's where, like, it definitely probably could. It's a pretty condensed, and that was the thing, was I was like, okay, but what are maybe some things that happen throughout this to, I guess, pad the runtime, but also just add some stuff to it.
Yeah. It also reminds me of The Girl with All the Gifts, which I believe is a French, maybe it's British. No, it's British. It's a British zombie movie. Mm-hmm. And it takes place like decades after, I think a decade after the zombie apocalypse would have happened. And they go into the city, and there's this giant formations, these giant like fungal formations in the city that they realize are these giant spore holding fungal plant things. And if they open them up, then it'll infect everyone basically with the zombie disease, because it turns out the zombie disease is a fungus. And then so they're freaking out about that the whole time, and then at the end, the girl with all the gifts, the girl who's already half zombie or whatever, so she's immune to it, makes it happen, like opens it, burns the whole thing, spores fill the air, and then it's like flashes forward to the future where only these zombie children can be alive. It's interesting. But it is similar in the fungal infection aspect.
Yeah. Right.
So I can see it being very cinematic based on what I saw from that film, because that was very intensely cinematic.
Yeah, absolutely. I watched this video that was just showing the ants, and it is crazy how the furs of the fungi sort of grow out of them, and then just this stem really just comes out of them. And I was like, that would be terrifying to see.
So I have lots of thoughts story-wise.
Cool.
What are your non-negotiables?
Non-negotiables are pretty much location, the fungi itself, and I do like I like the end beat, and I like the like police aspect of it, even though it's kind of crazy. This like the police deciding to do this, but I kind of want to play with the paranoia of the time period.
Oh, okay, interesting. Even though it's one of your non-negotiables, I'm going to pitch you on the change that I would make.
Okay.
And you can say no, and we can continue on with this location and time period. But if I were going to make this into a film and pick up the script and be like, okay, let's make it. We have to make some changes first. The change I would make is set it present day at a music festival in like the Pacific Northwest, like Sasquatch or Outside Lands or something. The kind where people go and camp in the forest. And it's still that kind of communal aspect, but then you get to have a bit more fun with them not being hippies who are fighting the war, the like protesting the war and everything that actually have like a purpose. And it's more privileged kids who are going to this thing to have fun and be one with nature, and they actually become one with nature as a form of almost like social punishment, but also then it makes it more relevant to these days, because frankly the thing that's really in right now is music festivals, and there's even a horror movie coming out this summer that's about festival goers, and it's a cult horror film about festival going, and I forgot what it's called, but the main tagline of it is like, it'll make you never want to go to a festival again, and that kind of thing. So I feel like there's so much opportunity for something that hasn't a relevant and current time period phenomena that hasn't been explored in the horror genre yet fully. Okay. So that's what I would do. And then it also, I think, makes it easier to make, because it's a lot cheaper to do something present day and in the woods. Mm-hmm. And makes it more isolated, makes it less easy for them to get help, less easy for them to get around, and then you don't have to worry about the production value of doing a period piece in San Francisco, in the Haight-Ashbury, in full daytime. Is the other thing. Forests are a lot scarier. Wilderness is a lot scarier. So doing in the middle of the city, unless you're going to go the full apocalypse route, which you could do if it didn't end so abruptly at the end, then I would say set it in a city, because then you can get to see the devastation of it. But since we end right before the devastation part of it, then I'm like, okay, well, let's amp up the fear factor earlier on, which is harder to do when it's in the middle of an urban situation, if that makes sense. So that's how I would pitch that change that I would personally make, but we don't have to.
No, I mean, you definitely, you talked me into it. I'm totally down to do it, because it makes sense structurally and everything.
I think the only thing about this, the thing that makes me feel like a change in setting would be worthwhile, is because there isn't a lot in the film that you have pitched so far that really makes it necessary to be in the 70s.
Right. And so the thing that I wanted to play with that I hadn't talked about in the pitch so far is sort of my overall question, which is what happened to the hippies, because where are they nowadays? Where is counterculture? Where's like any attempt to stand up for something?
Yeah.
And I kind of did want to showcase the privilege of that time period, and sort of the failing of counterculture.
Interesting.
However, I think that idea can still, like, the privilege side of it and those things can still be explored within the film as you sort of changed it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to explore privilege, I would 100% set it now as opposed to then, just because back then, even though as a counterculture it may have been represented by mostly white people who had enough privilege to be able to experiment in that kind of counterculture situation, I think many who lived through it, and even those now, wouldn't consider the hippie movement, the Summer of Love, necessarily one of privilege, in that there was a lot in there that was about sexual freedom, sexual revolution, gender freedom, racial freedom, and equality. The same way that there is a lot of protest about it now, it just manifests differently. It is a good question of where did counterculture go. However, I think it's the kind of thing that hindsight will always show. So right now, even though we're not able to say, like, what is our current counterculture, I think give it 10 years, we'll look back and be able to say, you know, this, like the Black Lives Matters group or drag culture or something that is outside of the mainstream right now that we don't necessarily see as breaking the status quo. Later on, we'll look back and say, that was the thing from then. but we can't know yet.
I think it'll be more spread out just as we have become more of a globalized society.
Yes,
but,
that's very true.
Fair enough. So yeah, let's move forward. Explore present day.
Okay. So the great thing about exploring at present day is that there is a lot of mistrust of the police, especially among communities of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be great to see at least one or more of the characters in this African-American or Latino, whatever person of color is most targeted by the police. I mean, obviously, brown and black people above all.
Absolutely agreed.
Because that, if there are police present, it still stirs that mistrust of police that can be played off of there. And I think that's an important thing presently to deal with. I mean, there was plenty of mistrust of the police then because of protests and everything. So it does parallel.
Mm-hmm.
I think race is an important factor. On top of that, I think now that I know where you wanted to end it, it makes more sense that we found out so early, quote unquote, that Leo was undercover, because when you told me, I was like, oh, we're barely into the second act. We can't reveal that already. And then we ended very soon after that. So I see now kind of how it beats out, and we can add more before that.
Yes.
To create more of a twist.
Yeah. So I think the portion that I skipped over just because I don't have it as fleshed out is them searching for Leo and sort of what happens in basically what would be the bulk of the second act.
Yes.
Which would be building up that mystery and stuff.
So I like the undercover thing is fine as long as it's revealed later, and I don't think it can be police because we're talking about biological warfare here. If it's being purposefully added to the circulated, we're getting into CIA territory. We're getting into government entity territory.
Yeah.
But I still think it would be CIA. Or
no,
something
totally.
higher.
I think it was high government.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
I didn't say that in the pitch, but no,
Yeah.
I definitely. It's not like it's like way up there.
Yeah. And I think in that situation, Leo, I don't know if he would be police necessarily, if he would be hired by, if he would be an agent undercover or something like that. Seems a bit more likely to me. I think we need to see him spend more time with the group as a friend, trying to help them figure this out before it's revealed at the end that he was in on it the whole time. And maybe what he's doing is at the end trying to get them back to, I don't know if it's too sci-fi to go back to like a lab or something. He's trying to get them into custody.
Yeah.
By the end. And so while he's saying like, oh, well, I'll help you track down, like, I'll help you like find, like get you to the hospital or something like that. And they trust him, only for at the end for it to be that he's actually been leading them to whoever's going to monitor them.
Yeah, this
experiment
like
on them.
what maybe looks like a festival checkpoint, but is actually where their operations are based out of.
Something. But what I do want to avoid, and you're going to have to help me with this since it's your idea, is I want to avoid, I don't know, the camp of it being a government agency purposefully trying to disseminate some sort of biological warfare among its own citizens.
Right. Oh, yes, because there's a very fine line in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely not blind to it or anything, and I definitely, there is like a silliness factor that can hella come up.
Yeah, and I really think that it'll damage some of the horror aspect, the body horror of it, if there's too much camp to it.
Yes. I think really playing with the honesty of distrusting of our
Authority.
government and authority at this time, even if it's sort of similarly operated to like ICE or something, where it's just like the government trying to suppress and control.
I think logistically I have some questions about the plot twist at the end. But honestly, don't need to worry about that right now, because the thing I want to focus on is the horror aspects in the middle of the second act. All we need to know is that they get infected with this fungal virus. What I want to see is more. Because right now, I think the most terrifying horror is the fungus growing out of them.
Yes.
And we only see it happen to one person. I like the idea that they don't have control of themselves, but I think it needs to be more uniform in that they all exhibit the same symptoms and they all go through the same metamorphosis. And with the first guy, Dodge, he disappears before we can really see any of that.
Right.
Kay the way you've pitched it, breaks out but doesn't lose control of her body. Parker loses control of her body but doesn't break out. I want to see them all go through the same stages and symptoms so that we establish a pattern and a rule for this disease. And what could work is seeing Dodge go through all of them and actually see him grow, like break open and things come out of him to a smaller extent, like small spores and things like that.
Yeah.
And they run from that because they're like, what the fuck is happening? And then it happens much worse later on with Kay or something. And maybe it's because she was breaking out and tiny spores were coming out earlier and she hid it from them. And that's why they didn't notice until it was already really, really bad, when like big things start growing out of her back and like she can't move anymore. And then it's the big burst of spores that's like apocalypse level, you know?
Gotcha, totally. Yeah, we can absolutely extend how long we're with Dodge, and I definitely think like seeing those little furs like growing out of them and stuff, absolutely here for that.
I'm picturing Annihilation with the tiny little bits growing out of Tessa Thompson.
Right, yeah. The like, yeah, totally.
Seeing things like that happening earlier on. So we get that body horror aspect, and we have a steady build up to when it happens really impressively with Kay, or maybe with Parker, because you need to be able to kill some darlings in horror. So maybe Dodge dies, maybe Kay dies, and then Parker and Marty are the last ones, and then that's when something really bad happens.
Yeah.
Something like that. So there's a bit more build up.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to play with Parker being sort of the perceived protagonist, and then Marty being the one who lives at the end. And so we kind of have just this like...
It's a dare campaign.
Yeah.
Just say no.
I thought about that a million times while preparing it. I was like, you know what? But honestly, don't take drugs from randos. Like, I don't think that's a really crazy stance to take.
Yeah.
It's dumb. You're risking it. You can do it. I don't care. But it's dumb. So
it's true.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And it is a dare campaign. I thought about that too. I was like, that's freaking funny.
That's fine.
But I did kind of want to play with this, like, yeah, with Parker being really looking for like an experience before sort of just settling into the rest of life. And you're kind of she's supposed to have the character arc of, oh no, I'm going to like go and live every day importantly or something. But she just does not make it to that.
Right.
And instead we have Marty left with him being left with this decision of, do I end it? Do I like continue onwards with this fungus in me? Do I burn it all down? What is the end game here?
Yeah. That's a good final question to end on, especially if we've seen what happens with Dodge and then we see what happens with Kay, and then we know it's going to happen with Parker, and maybe we know for some reason that it's going to be much worse when it happens with her. Maybe because of their location, and she's saying like, you have to kill me now or whatever, or like maybe they're in some I don't know, maybe she literally pours gasoline on herself and she's like, need to fucking light me on fire and kill this thing, and he's like, no. Like it's a whole, and he's the one holding the matches, and she's like, you got to do it. And it's a struggle like that. Like it can be really upsetting.
Yeah.
If we establish the only way to kill this thing is to burn it or whatever.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which like that would prevent the spreading of a pollen. So yeah, totally. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing such an interesting idea and sharing about fungus.
Yeah,
and
no
stuff
worries.
Like that.
I knew this one was going to be out there. So thanks for
yours
bearing
usually
with
are,
it.
though. I know when I come into this, like, I'm going to hear something I did not expect at all.
I hope so.
You're definitely unexpected every time.
Yeah. Well, this has been Jump Scare the Podcast.
Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Jump Scare the Podcast, Twitter at Jump Scare the Pod, and Facebook is also just Jump Scare the Podcast.
Yeah, it's really easy to find us.
It is.
If you have any ideas for this, we'd love to hear them. So direct message us, or you can email us, jumpscarethepodcast@gmail.com.
Exactly. Very nice. Okay. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, and Casey?
Yeah?
Cortisol. Cortisons?
Cortisol! Cortisol!
Wait a second. Was it cortisol? Cortisons?
Cordyceps.
Cordyceps. Courtesans are the people that are in court.
Yep.
Cortisol is the cream you put on your hands.
and they're all so scary.
Cordyceps.
Ah!
Let's try it again. Hey, Casey.
Yeah.
Cordyceps.
Ah!
Fucking cortisol.
Cortisol.
I panicked last second and I was like, wait, was it cortisol? No, it wasn't.
Not the lotion.